Hello, this is Mrs. Brown, and today we're going to be talking about weighted averages. So before we start talking about a weighted average, let's look at a regular average. For a regular average or the mean, what we would do is add up all of the numbers and then divide by however many numbers there are. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 numbers. So that's 10, 15, 20, 32, 39, 48. So I end up with 48 divided by 8, or an average of 6. Now let's look at how weighted average is different. See how I have multiple 5s? Well, if I'm doing a weighted average, I would count, I've got 4 5s. So I would just show it like this instead of writing 5 4 times. Plus, I've got 2 6s. I've got 1 7 and 1 9. Okay. Now, these numbers are what we call the weight. And when we're talking about lists of numbers, it's just how many there are. So instead of writing out 5, 5, 5, 5, I'm just doing 4 times 5. It's a shortcut. When you're thinking about it that way, it's a little bit less confusing. When you're starting to look, I'm not even going to show you the formula because it tends to get really confusing when you look at it. But if you stop to think about how it's related to regular averages, which you're good at, that you can see that it's just the number of those there. Now, the question, and this is the part that trips a lot of people up, is what to divide by. And in order to figure that out, you have to look at all of the weights. So I've got 4, 2, 1, and 1. And what that corresponds to is how many there are. So I have 4 5, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers. I have 2 6s, so that's 2 numbers. There's one of these and one of these. So really, I have 4 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1 numbers, or 8 on the bottom. So this number is the weights added together. And we'll look at some other examples. But 4 times 5 is 20. So this is 20, 12, 7, and 9. I add them up, I get 48. I still do 48 divided by 8 and 6 because it's the same problem. But again, these are the weights added together. This is the most common error that people make. They get this part right, and then they divide by 1, 2, 3. There's 4 groups, so they do 4 instead of the weights. So just take the weights and add them together. When I do it, I always write my weight first, so I know which numbers to add together, and that way I don't get confused. You could circle the weights as you're doing it, setting up your problem, and then again, you know to add those together to get your denominator. Okay, so let's look at some examples. All right, so this is what a typical word problem might look like. The coordinate 4 has a weight of 3, and the coordinate 5 has a weight of 2. Find the weighted average. Okay, so I have a 4 with a weight of 3. And what that means is there are 3 4s. So I'm going to do 3 times 4 plus the coordinate 5 has a weight of 2. So that means there are 2 5s. Okay, so again, when I'm looking at this word weight, okay, I've got a 3 and I've got a 2. So when I go to divide, 3 plus 2 is 5. It goes in the denominator. So 3 times 4 is 12, plus 10 more would give me 22 divided by 5. And so that's going to go in 4.4 times. Okay. So again, when we're looking at that, because it'd be 4 2/5. So when I'm looking at it, if I circle my weights and then I add those together to get my denominator. So let's take a look at another example. I have coordinate 9 has a weight of 6. And 4 has a weight of 2. And 11 has a weight of 3. So once again, when I'm looking at my problem, weight of 6, weight of 2, weight of 3. So I'm going to take 6 plus 2 plus 3. 6 plus 2 is 8, plus 3 more is 11. So my denominator that I'm dividing by in this case is going to be 11. So this is 54 plus 8 plus 33. And so when I look at that, that would be 62. So 95. So I've got 95 divided by 11, which is not a friendly number since 11 does not go into that, and it will not give me a nice decimal. So I'm actually probably going to leave it. You could convert it to like 8 with 7 elevenths, but you can leave it as 95 elevenths. In that case, we don't need a decimal estimate. All right, so let's look at one other type of problem that you might run into. Okay, having to do with grades. Grades are a lot of times weighted averages. If any of your teachers have like any of their categories weighted, like tests are worth this much, this percent, or assignments are worth this percent. That's what we do in weighted average. And actually for geometry, we have a semester grade, and our semester grade is 35% of your first quarter grade and 35% of your second quarter and 30% of your midterm. So let's look at a couple of examples of how I would do this. Now, percent means per 100. So it's out of 100. So in this case, we're going to deal with the weighted part first by just dividing the weights by 100. So 35%, we're going to make 0.35, and then we don't have to divide by anything afterwards. So if I take a look, 35% of my quarter 1 grade, so that's going to be 0.35 times 90, plus I'm going to do 0.35 times my second quarter grade, plus my midterm is 0.30, because 30% divided by 100, so change to a decimal, be 83. Okay, when I multiply this out, this comes out to 31.5, 32.2, and 24.9, and adding them all up, get 88.6, and that would be my semester grade if that was the case. So even though I ended up with A's both quarters because my midterm was a B, I ended up with a B because both of these are fairly low A's. Now let's take a look at this scenario. This person had A's, but they're higher, so 95 and 98, but they only got a 75 on their midterm. How is that going to look different? Again, I'm not changing this percent. I'm only changing the weight. So the weight is per 100, so 0.35, because 35% as a decimal is 0.35, times 95, plus 0.35 times 98, plus 0.30 times 75. When I multiply these out, I end up with 33.25 plus 34.3 plus 22.5. And when I add all those up, I end up with 90.05. Barely, but yes, still have an A. So understanding weighted averages is really important. So I know that sometimes in the past you've had where, you know, any A, it's just an A, and like a 95 isn't really that much better than a 92. But when you're using it for something like calculating the semester grades, having low A's versus high A's can make a big difference, because the midterm is something you can only take once. You can't retake it, just like the end of course exam is something you can only take the once for part of that grade. So making sure that we have higher grades here gives us more of a cushion, so we're more likely to end up with what we want at the end. Okay, so again, looking back, okay, the most common mistake is this number on the bottom, and that is the sum of your weights. So when you're doing a word problem like this, you can underline your weights or make a note of them, and you're adding 6 plus 3 plus 2 in this case, or a weight of 3 plus 2 in that case. So making sure you're adding the weights together for your denominator so that you will be successful. Okay, if you have any questions, you know where to find me. Have a great day.